the system is unjust. It is. It's an attack on a race of people who's not only by colour different, but on race of people who has something we believe it's essential to our existence. And we've survived this far, and if things are being taken away from us underneath our feet, how long does people expect us to survive? Because I know the system has wanted Aboriginal people to die out in the first place, so we're trying to hang on. The creation spirits from a faraway island called Buralko to the shores of Yallangbra. Their canoe turned into rocks. As the ancestors came across onto the land, they pierced it with their walking sticks, making the sacred waterholes. They followed the tracks of Janda, the Goanna, across the sand hills and created many tribes. The people of northeast Arnhem Land, the Yolngu. You'll always see a Goanna in my family's sacred artwork. The background of my design is the area of Yallangbra, and the middle part is the freshwater, which is directly underneath the beaches of Yallangbra, next to the sea. The creative spirits travelled overland from place to place. They gave the people of each area their culture, their language, songs, rituals, and dances. And all of these people are interconnected by song lines. And if anywhere along that line, one of these people's artwork is abused or misused, it doesn't just affect one family, one artist. It affects all people right across that landscape. Taking an art from an artist, altering it to suit yourself as a design, transferring it onto a material and calling it an Aboriginal art is an infringement, not only on the actual transferring of the artwork, but an infringement and false acknowledgement of intellectual rights.
Well, copyright literally means the right to copy, of course. And if you create an artwork, you own the right to reproduce that artwork, which you may pass to other people. The Act really defines or deals with things that are in physical form. The Copyright Act doesn't deal with things that are very inherent within Aboriginal cultural life. In an Aboriginal sense, things are made far more communally, they're owned communally. The ownership goes on forever. You were given these designs by God when He created your family, your original member of your family. You have them, you'll pass them on. In Western terms, that copyright only exists 50 years after the death of the person who makes that art piece. That doesn't deal with that whole concept of that things don't necessarily exist in a physical form. Storytelling, singing, dancing, performance of all kind are protected under that Act.
My father, being a leader, an elder and a lawgiver, he created the laws. That role was inherited. And I think my brother basically had the same sort of role to play as well. But he went further. I think him and myself became known to the family as the outcast, because we moved outside of our boundary and went out to an unknown territory, which was known as the Balanda world, which is white man's world. And he initiated the whole debate about copyright that is being still fought 20 years on still.
First I saw in Cairns when I walked into the shop, and all of a sudden I looked this one. I was very shocked because I seen this my most important painting from me and from my father.
When you say you lost your power, what do you mean? What power?
My power to how to paint, how to tell the story, how to teach my children, because they have been lost.
He was so insulted by the whole thing and so moved by it that he gave up painting until into the 80s. And when the Aboriginal Arts Board of the Australia Council was created, he was placed on that board. He then talked to people in the Australia Council, and as a result they set up an agency called the Aboriginal Artist Agency in order to pursue breaches of copyright.
Yirrkala was set up as a Methodist mission in the 1930s, at the time of the first real contact with the European people. Many clans or groups were brought in from the different areas of northeast Arnhem Land to live at the mission. Yirrkala is now a well-established Aboriginal artist community.
The Art Centre at Yirrkala, Bukalangi Molka, services an area of about 300-kilometre radius. We service the outstations, which cater for the 16-odd clan groups that make up the Yolngu Society of Northeast Arnhem Land. An enormous amount of high-quality, traditional-based art is produced not only here at Yirrkala, but at these outstations. We operate with the advice of an artist committee which is made up of senior artists, landowners, clan leaders, who dictate the running of the art centre and what is produced. We have been entrusted as a conduit between the Yolngu world and the non-Aboriginal art marketplace.
What are you in this or something?
G'day, John. Hey, Dave. Welcome aboard. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Very well, thanks, Holly. Had a good time in Remington.
Yeah, had a good time.
Yeah, going to Hallelujah.
This little boy, eh?
G'day, John. Go, Jane, and me.
John Bellaka Maimaru, John Mundone, MCA in Sydney, Bellaka's Bungawa for the Mungalili.
And this is your painting, eh? Oh, you're working on it now. Yeah. This project is really to do with Bukalangai arts and the artist in this region, and it's to do with an exhibition that's been called the Native Title Exhibition. That'll take place at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney in September. and it's a selection of large, really large bark paintings that cover most of the major clan groups in this area and the creation stories to do with that.
So one time to collect turtle eggs, that is turtle stripes. So you follow the stripes. It's the
One of the most interesting things about it is it's trying to illustrate how art relates to land and how it's very special for people. It's what inspires them. Art and land are actually the same. People and land are the same thing.
Art and land is very important because it is the identity. It's what gives me an identification. If I didn't have those, I wouldn't know who I would be. I wouldn't know where I'd come from. I wouldn't have any identification of who I am and how I fit into this society.
We are cultural people. We are ceremony people. We are language people. We got culture for black people. And my father said, before he passed away in here, Gordon, look after our land. Because he was thinking, my old man, what happened will be maybe mining came along, or somebody will come and take over. We go back to Garngan, establishing our land, our homelands, so we can look after ourselves. Not for alcoholics, not for anything, drugs. Garngan gonna be dry area.
Part of responsibility to do with boundaries, which an art for Garngan has a Pacific art. They have their own art, own designs, symbols or motifs that they use, because those art carries the laws of land.
If somebody breaks the law, it can get killed by that ox bear. If somebody breaks the law for Mangali, it can hit by big stick or walking sticks. That was before, but not now. We use these two only for dance and crowd today. Why I'm saying this? Because today is we in two worlds, Western world and Euro world. That's why we can't use fighting one another, killing one another. It's only arguing. And that's why it used to be, you know, killed by the ox bear. Nepiri we call it, or patti.
Stark areas of black.
Yeah,
which
well, they
would
look
be,
great on those white walls.
Yeah,
So that's good.
direct contrast to the very fine Minchi designs of Yuricha.
But this will look really great with these sort of scallop shapes that go back and back and back, and this big black whirlpool, water spout.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what the painting is two water spouts and the turbulent salt water, the turbulent seas which have been created by Bong, the Thunderman. What the Yolngu of this area have done is they've embraced the concept of coming out with more art, with more sacred designs and more explanations to these designs. Not exactly what the designs say, but what they mean, and that's the relationship and ownership of the land. So with the MCA show, it is the idea of the people travelling down for this show, the Yolngu people, to put an extra stamp, if you like, on the concept of land ownership. Regarding that, the paintings are looked upon by these people as title deeds. Therefore, we look upon them as perhaps the most beautiful title deeds in the world. Now, on top of the paintings, a physical performance of sand sculpture and dance associated with particular areas of land for some of these clan groups will be displayed.
people are connected to very particular places, and there are places where people's soul comes from, where they come from themselves. Now, they can only paint those places. They have copyright, so to speak, in a Western sense, on the imagery to do with those places, but it's more than just a copyright. It's something very sacred and special to them. You can't, copyright doesn't even begin to address that sort of relationship that people have.
This is the Ingapungabo paintings. It's only for Banel himself, while you guys now standing right in Banel, and this is the paintings come from. This is his design. Ingapungabo means lots of things. Also, Ingapungabo means we can use for funeral, as a funeral ground. As you see those pictures, bones, everything, all there. Also, we can cleanse ourselves, make ourselves free with this design here.
When the world was created and these spirit figures moved across the landscape, everywhere they moved and that, they left traces or footprints in the landscape. And those footprints may be in the form of a river, a waterhole or a rock formation. However, they're represented in geometric patterns, and it's represented in bark, in paintings, it's represented as body paintings, and it'll be represented as a sand sculpture when the native title exhibition opens. In many ways, this area was the birth of land rights, because in the 1960s, when the mining company came here to Balco, came here to mine, people reacted in a number of ways, and one of those ways was a petition of bark paintings with a statement saying, look, we own this land, we've always owned this land, how is it that we don't own it now?
It was presented to the High Court in Australia, where it received that much public recognition that it's become known as the first tool of land rights. Obviously, the court of the day couldn't handle such a document, and the attempt to stop the excision of this land failed.
The whole thing with copyright is symbolic of racism within Western society when it came here, so that Aboriginal people do not count. So you have a law, that concept like terra nullius, well, there's no one here, and yet we know there are Aboriginal people here, but they don't count. You have this community that's lived there for thousands of years over this whole peninsula, and suddenly they're being told that this isn't their land. And not only that, it's actually really physically going to be taken away from them. You know, all that landscape is full of signs and sacred places. In 1963, people were examining this in a big way, and one of the things that they did were, with the help of a Christian missionary there, was to do two large panels of the stories of the Dua and Yuricha stories, which involved all the major artists of the region and all the families of the region.
Why they created that panel was to make a type of a statement to tell those Christian people, here's a law, here's a culture, but there's clearly a so-called 10 Commandments written or not written within our Aboriginal structure, which art carries. Then it comes down to my brother's work here, then it goes off to my father's work here. But there's a different clan coming in here. And I think that's to show the association between the creators to an artist or a leader. When they say, see an artwork, they know exactly what that represents or which country it represents. Those days people were still nomads and travelling So you understood your land and boundaries, and from people telling you that's a site, and they talked about it, a Pacific site, to let you know about creation stories and other things. When I started making my print site, it was just natural that I transferred those knowledges, but onto paper.
The carpet case was a copyright infringement case involving the reproduction as carpets of a number of major Aboriginal artworks, many of which are in the National Gallery of Australia in Canberra. The case had its origins back in July 1991 when a West Australian businessman, Brian Bethune, ordered a number of carpets to be made up from Aboriginal artwork folios which he saw when he was in Vietnam on a business trip. He had the carpets made up from those works, brought them back into Australia and started to sell them.
Well, I think I felt as angry as the other artists did. I think when an artist creates an artwork, you're either creating it for your own self, whether you're creating in the end to sell it for money. But I think the urge to create art is to create it for yourself in the first place. And something as important as this one, which is artwork that represents my ancestral land, Yallangbra. It's where my people was created.
People were quite shocked and horrified about what had actually happened to these works, because they had actually placed the works in the National Gallery or in private collections on the understanding that they would be there for educational purposes and that they would serve the purpose of educating non-Aboriginal Australians about Aboriginal Australia. In some cases, people actually stopped working, stopped painting. There were lots of big community meetings. People blamed the particular artists because this had occurred. They hadn't done enough to protect the dreaming. They hadn't looked after the images enough.
The laws and cultures that different arts carry is inherited through family stories or histories. And with that history comes the responsibility of nobody from outside that family circle can produce what belongs to you. And if so, the penalties are very severe. It could be spearing, it could be forever abandonment from the family.
The Aboriginal Arts Management Association attempted to negotiate with the importer, with Brian Bethune, and essentially they at no time said that they would stop the importation and the sale. And so in those circumstances the artists were left with no option other than to institute proceedings in the federal court for what was a very clear and subsequently found to be a very flagrant infringement of their copyright. The trial was a very long one. It went for 13 days in the federal court. Part of it was conducted in Darwin, where the Aboriginal artists and community members and other witnesses gave their evidence to the court about the artwork. One issue that the artists did argue, and argued successfully in the case, was that because of the particular circumstances of the infringements and the particular harm that's caused to them in the communities that they live in, then they should be compensated for hurt and harm. And the judge accepted that submission and made an award of damages for what has become known as cultural harm.
It would be easy then for the European or the white society to just say all they want to do is cry because of its money. It's not money. It's it is nice to, yes, receive a bit of compensation or whatever, but there's a backbone of culture here what only Aboriginal person knows the understanding of meaning the backbone.
The outcome of the case was that the artists obtained an injunction against any further manufacture or importation of the carpets. They also obtained an award of $188,000 in damages. The case set important legal precedents for all artists in Australia, but it was particularly important for Aboriginal artists and Aboriginal communities generally in sending a very clear message to people that it's not open season on Aboriginal culture. They had the right to be consulted and a negotiation undertaken and an agreement struck before their work was used.
Through my spiritual connection with this old man, I have that strong link with him through this, him being my godfather or my spiritual father. I would have to still come and ask him to paint any art that belonged to himself and his land. We both share the goanna in that connection through the ancestors. And when he creates his art, the design's different, but we have an association of the same ancestor. One of the best things about Aboriginal culture and how people live and recognise each other is through physical connection with the ancestors, but also through spiritual connection. The spiritual connection, when I talked about myself and this old man, that sort of spiritual connection. And we refer to that connection as a string, recognising the line connection, the string carrying from one peoples and groups to another, and how they're connected through that string.
Early last year, one of the ladies from this community was invited to go for a ministerial wedding. She went looking for a new dress. She bought a dress which had the Aboriginal bark paintings reproduced on the fabric. She brought the dress back, and that was the first time that the community became aware that the painting by Birakichi, Galren's father, was reproduced on the fabric.
Somebody was lots of painting like this, then stealing, rubbing, stealing, put into calico. I don't know who they are. They came and take picture and put it in the calico like, and make it up out of crust with that knowing. And with that, they didn't asking, honor of the artist is my father. They didn't ask me or him is a grandson about this calico. That means I call robbing, stealing. I can't stealing you painting, your artist. Otherwise you put me in the jail. You put me in the God, because that's your property. But this one and this painting is my property, my clan property, not for everybody. This one comic, I said. Take away from my bark, real bark, put it in the calico. That means this copycats, copyright. Make it up. please stop there. The world, in the world, Australia, government, please talk to them and tell them.
Ya honorable, tipu agak perbekalan orangnya wang ada no, wang aja koyo, nak guna itu lang no, lang ay lajak kan beruda itu lang, tipu ngajal kengo, kadia kal melakal wanjengo, tapi orang majeng kan lurkon, ya deh ngarak koye. Ngarak kaya wang aja, ngarak kalmai mereka kangal, yo, ngarak kue kangal, neni ya jalan do, kata nunggu menunggu, ini bicaranya, ngayu kajan wang aja, tapi mereka yang beriku cek yang ada jadi, talak jadi yang ada, dia yang ada jadi, tapi pulang ada jadi, jalke yang ada jadi, ngarau, kamera korulan, lihat yo, berkoran do tinggi ngarau, tapi yang nuk ngolan dau yang malai. Marang bukmak, kapudai kan bu, barang bukmak, ringgit kan bu, barang bukmak.
The whole act of painting and performing and presenting your culture in art is a way of trying to communicate with people like Garawan, who's a very senior person within the Aboriginal society, and he holds this knowledge, which is encapsulated or encoded within various art forms, and these are to be kept for future generations. If that art is either denigrated or, debased in any way, it's an insult to the law, and the insult to the law is insult to the person, of course, and the society.
This park painting, I'm painting for exhibition to Sydney. Please, not copycats. Eh? When you go to Sydney, this belongs to Sydney, for Sydney. We're saying, oh, this is going to be staying at Sydney. If somebody will see only, but not copyright or not copycats. Or feeling.
I think if Aboriginal people are saying that land is important for us, then it is important for us to pass important information down to the younger generation so they do grow up and be responsible for land, not just in a cultural way, but in a contemporary sort of way as well. Because it is about environment as well. It's not art, it's not land, but it is the whole environment that this art carries.
It must be pretty frustrating because really after winning the judgment and having damages awarded to you and the other artists, really it's proven almost impossible to recover anything at this stage. I mean, the latest is that, well, as you know, Brian Bethune was declared bankrupt in 1995, and that bankruptcy has proceeded, but he hasn't effectively made an acceptable offer to the artists.
It's just very frustrating. It's just, it's the damages one way had been done, but there's ongoing damages on the go all the time because people are waiting for some sort of acknowledgement to be given so that people could exist.
And put an end to the whole episode. I mean,
Yeah.
but basically, it's yet another example of just how difficult it is to recover debts when someone goes into bankruptcy. And we've seen in Australia lots of high-profile cases of entrepreneurs in the 80s who are able to walk away with virtually no payment of the creditors.
In the meantime, when all that case was going on, we lost 3 artists in the processes of the whole thing, and another one later during. I mean, to those families, I don't myself. You know, I probably could say I'm okay because I work and earn my money too. Where there's a lot of people who might be just on pension or just their income from time to time from sale of art that might have needed that money more than I.
One of the really interesting things was the labelling and what was actually said on the labels that were attached to all the carpets. It says, proudly designed in Australia by Australian Aboriginals, made in Vietnam. But then the fine print actually says, these unique wall hangings and rugs have been designed by Aboriginal artists from areas throughout Australia. These artists are paid royalties on every carpet sold. And that was completely untrue, and the judge found that that was completely untrue.
Yes. None of us even knew any of that stuff. I mean, let alone receiving royalties.
It would be hard to imagine a grosser misrepresentation of the truth than that label.
Yes.
That raises another issue with people dying, artists dying. They don't have wills and they don't assign their copyright. They have this economic right or, right to their work, and when they die, who looks after it?
Yeah, that frightens me.
Once the copyright issue was opened to the public, and then Aboriginal people like myself who's put it on the table for people's debate to what we're trying to claim, which is a cultural information and cultural properties, the system seems to, on one hand, acknowledge it. System meaning the government. And on the other hand, it takes away at the same time because it allows the sorts of people to continue their business in ripping off Aboriginal people's cultural properties, intellectual and visual, and through, when we're presented through physical performances as well. People are always got to copycat. People's always got to transfer it on something. People's always doing it, and they're doing it and they're getting away with it.
A lot of Indigenous arts and cultural expression may not meet the requirements of the Copyright Act. Firstly, one of the requirements of the Copyright Act is that a work be in material form. It has to be, in some sort of tangible form so you can have an interest. But with a lot of Indigenous material, it's oral tradition, so it's performed, even though it's still owned by Indigenous people, and there are all these conditions about how it might be reproduced. It will not be protected under the Copyright Act.
But like how can whole body, like dance?
So you're getting ready?
Yeah, getting ready for dance.
And are you making the direction to the sun?
Yeah,
that's what the sun.
Javan, like sun.
I'm working on a project to develop reform proposals for the greater protection of Indigenous cultural and intellectual property. What the project is on about is trying to find ways in which the current legal framework can recognise Indigenous interests in that way. The issue is becoming much more pressing with the Sydney Olympics coming up. Australia itself will be wanting to promote Australia and Australian content. They'll be looking for Australian products, and that search will be going further and further into Indigenous arts and cultural material.
Australia as such has always defined itself through Indigenous imagery. You know, you just have to look at the advertisements overseas. They always have, you know, a black fella there with a spear. They've got the didgeridoo. They've exploited, used it for their own purposes for many years. They're comfortable with doing that. And they're comfortable with having that as an Australian image as such. But they don't give respect and merit back to the Indigenous people.
What happens is, like, a T-shirt company will say, it'd be really good if we have an Australian design to have for the Olympics. Let's have an Aboriginal T-shirt. So they get their non-Indigenous graphic designer to do up something that is a stylised piece of what they perceive as Aboriginal art. That's where you get a lot of the X-ray koala type things that are basically very kitsch. What is this?
No, but the
original statue.
I can't say that I really like that. But see, I have a really big problem with the tourist market, for sure. And particularly in relation to the way that they go to Indonesia and they rip off, or Vietnam or whatever, they rip off another culture to prop up commercial enterprises in Australia for profit.
Oh, I feel ill. I mean, Qantas, eat your heart out, you know? See, I just find all this stuff really inferior, and I bet you, what's it got here? Throwing instructions, so we know how to throw it, but we don't have to say it's made by an Aboriginal person, even though an Aboriginal person invented it. We don't have to do any of that. We just rip it off and put it in a shop and make lots of money for some nice commercial person. Handmade in Australia, that's gammon, look at it.
The idea of an authenticity label is another proposed solution. It's been discussed since about the 80s. That is not like a copyright interest, it's more using trade practices and trademarks law. It's more like consumer protection, identification, a bit like the wool label, the Australian-made labels. And that would be one way that a consumer who is interested in buying something that is the authentic product would be able to look for when they go into the shop. It would be encouraging quality. It would hopefully encourage retailers to buy quality products rather than the rip-offs.
So, Irene, Naparula, Nirapi via Alice Springs, Bush Tucker. Women collecting bush plum.
It's very nice.
Yeah, it is a nice one. Little marks.
See, this one's very good because they're cataloguing it too. They're putting a code on so that when it's like you sell the painting, but the artist keeps the the copyright. in the image.
That's true.
So good cataloguing practices like that are great.
So if a museum buys it or something like that, then the artist can always reuse the work for commercial purposes, can't they?
Overall, people have to increase their perception, change their mood about Aboriginal art, and personally challenge the individual about, and that means you challenge yourself about the validity of your work on what you're doing. And then I think we'll see a great maturation for people who are city fellas who are painting and country fellas who are painting. And then their children are able to take on that newer culture and replace the one that's been taken. And that's just as relevant as anything that's been there for millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years.
Every piece of technology that comes along, whether it be an aeroplane or a car or whatever, provides more access into communities that hitherto have been not really connected to the outside world. What the internet does is it allows a message which is put on the internet to be perceived by whatever it is, 120 million users right throughout the world in one go. And under the existing system, anyone can access to that once you put it on the internet. And I don't think people in communities have developed any protocols and awareness of what that really means yet. I can open this, I'm connected to the world, just as simple as the press of a button. Anything that comes up, I can then just download it from this, an image from here, and print it out on my printer, and I've got the copy. With a case like the carpet case, you've got people actually took posters of these paintings to Vietnam and showed the Vietnamese people. With the internet, you don't even have to do that. You don't even have to go there. You can transport these images via telephone line to anywhere in the world and then reproduce them in quality enough to be reproduced in, say, a carpet or a T-shirt or whatever, drink can, whatever.
That one, the one painting in that's a laugh for me because that's to a Gangan story.
Yeah, some of the story we can't tell. Yeah. Like that one, like this one and that one, we can tell.
Today, we are one people. We learn it as a Yolngo. Yolngo people, we learn from you. Now, what about you can learn from Yolngo people too? What about the people world can learn something from Yolngo people, Aboriginal people? Not to steal, not to take away, not to robbing us. We are people. We should trust one another.
Aboriginal people are still strong. We still have our languages and culture. And all we've ever wanted was some sort of respect from Europeans and other people. The same sort of negotiation rights to agree on something or not to agree, so that we can control and maintain our culture.
Yang hanya barang